Welcome to the Resilient Recruiter Podcast. This is your host, Mark Whitby, and I'm super excited to be joined today by Katherine Jerald. Katherine is a second-generation recruiter. She remembers the first day her father opened a recruiting firm. She actually got to skip school at the age of 12 to help set up the office computers. She later rejoined her father's search firm, FPC Portland, in 2015 as an executive recruiter and opened an FPC office in Lake Oswego, Washington. During her tenure at FPC, Katherine was the 5-time winner of FPC's Top Recruiter Award. In 2022, Katherine launched her own firm, Research, a firm that's committed to solving the biggest talent needs of the middle market in aerospace, satellite, and defense. Katherine is also a proud member of the Pinnacle Society. In fact, she was the 2022 Pinnacle Conference speaker, and she's also an active member of SSPI, which is Space and Satellite Professionals International, and the Leading Ladies of Aerospace. Sounds intriguing. I'm super proud to have Katherine as a client as well. Katherine, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mark. Big honor.
All right. So I think you're the first person who I have had on the show where you actually got a taste of recruiting as a very young person. Could you tell that story? I think that might be a fun way to kick things off.
Yeah. So my father was my age now. I'm 41 years old. And he'd gotten, BD, you get fired all the time if you don't make a number. So he'd gotten fired. And I really admire this now that I'm his age too. Family to support, 2 young girls at home. And he's like, I don't want to do corporate America anymore. And I've always liked the search process. So without a whole lot of capital, he dove in, purchased an FPC franchise and leveraged, he'd always been kind of VP in paper, leveraged that background into creating his own firm. So I was 12 years old when it happened. And actually, I have a 12-year-old daughter now. So there's similar parallels. And I think it was like a Monday. They were opening up shop and he looks at me, 6 a.m. in the morning and says, "Hey, how about coming into the office today? Like a take your daughter to work day." And it was more of a, "Oh God, can you set up these computers?" kind of thing. So at the ripe age of 12, that was my first day spent in the office. And all growing up, I spent summers working after school, working in the office to get allowance money.
Awesome. What kind of stuff when summer jobs as you were growing up, how much did you really understand what the business was all about? Or
You get a taste for it really young in terms of hanging out with recruiters. And there's some salty language. And we had, this was kind of the early days of tech boom and stuff, with the putting green in the office. So that, and my father also does talk about the deal when he goes home. I'm not that way at all. That's the last thing I want to talk about. So I was always around it. So you do get a idea, and it's usually the problems that you hear about, but you do get a pretty good idea of what's happening at a young age.
that's so cool because I had no clue that this industry even existed until I stumbled into it in my early 20s, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I knew it was going to be sales related, but you kind of always knew what recruiting was all about. But then you didn't go into it straight away. What did you do after university?
So senior year, graduating from undergrad, I said the last thing I want to do is recruiting because so I want to do my own thing. So I hopped on a plane. I really couldn't speak French that well. I could read it, but I became an English teacher in the south of France. Did that.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And then a year later, I came back and I really hadn't tried to get a job. And so I said, "Hey, Dad, how about that?" And so I spent I took a long break, but I spent the next year and a half, 2 years, um, doing the recruiting. And when you're 22 years old, I think my first year out, I billed like 320. So
Wow, that's a
where else can you
phenomenal
make that
first
kind of
year.
money as a 22-year-old though? This was a 360 model, that kind of thing. And I was grinding it, but obviously I'd had, an education at a very young age too. So that's what gave me the taste for it. And it's the best job in the world. Yeah,
Do you know what? It's the best job and it's the worst job, kind of rolled
absolutely.
into one. Um, Depending on whether you're doing well or you're not, whether the
It's
deal closes or not.
it's an emotional roller coaster. I had a great week this week, so I am thinking, oh
Great.
God, how could I ever do anything else? And the reality is, I don't have a fallback plan. I don't have any other skills. I've only ever recruited. So, like, this is it.
Well, luckily you're very good at what you do.
Thank you.
So, um, I'm, I'm, I kind of tempted to find out how you build 320 in your very first rookie year, but on a bigger context, like what's it like working in a family business though? Like, because is that easier or harder, or like what was that experience like?
Well, if it's all you've ever known, your
Mm,
baseline is a little different. So, my father is my best friend in the world today.
cool,
Yeah, he's the first person I call when anything's great or goes wrong. And growing up in the industry, uh, over the past 10 years, it hasn't been that. Occasionally, in my 20s when we were just starting out, it'd be like, oh, putting the squeeze on to come to family dinner. But reality is, our family's so ingrained. My sister's now my employee, those kind of
cool.
things that you just can't really imagine life a different way if you grow up that way.
Yeah, interesting. Because we have some clients whose children are also in recruiting, but they intentionally decided not to work together because it was better for their relationship. So you've like, has there been any downside or?
Well, I mean, there's always, ups and downs in terms of working with family.
Yeah,
Obviously, if you hire somebody you can't fire, that's the biggest reservation about hiring family. Um, you know, it's much more emotionally connected, but
yeah,
who else would you want to spend the day with? Fortunately, I love my family, and
yeah.
they're fun and funny and salty, and we let it fly. But every family dynamic's different, so I can't say
Mhm.
it's going to work for everybody.
What about like, did you feel more pressure that you had to prove that like you deserved your spot and you weren't just there due to nepotism? Like you were working in an office with other recruiters who could get fired. Did you feel like that added more pressure or?
No,
Okay,
I mean, I'm
cool.
grateful for the opportunity, having
Mhm.
had that education. And yeah, but I think this is just me in general, whether it's family or not. I am totally motivated by fear, and I do not want to mess it up. And like there wasn't
Okay.
really any other great plan Bs either. And when you kick tail right out of the gate, it's like, oh well, I guess I'm good at this, so let's keep rolling. And in terms of the family nepotism piece, I was in a wonderful position, and I am grateful for that. So,
Yes.
maybe it inspired me to not want to mess it up, but that's about it.
Yeah. It's so funny. I think when you say fear of failure, I think almost everybody is more motivated by the fear of failure than the desire for success. In fact, this came up recently in a conversation internally. We've hired a new team member, Julie McGrath.
She's great. I love her.
Oh, brilliant! We love her too. I'm glad to hear that from you. And we were having this whole discussion about like which is a bigger motivator. Is it the desire for the goal, or is the fear of failure and the consequence of that? And I think for myself, I have a goal that I'm really, you know, super motivated to achieve, that I think about every day. And that does motivate me. But I also have been through some really, really tough times. And I never, ever, ever want to experience that again. And I think of the two, that's definitely the stronger driver for me. Um, What does your, but it sounds like you've been successful all along. Where does the fear of failure come from?
It's probably one of those things you're maybe even born with. It's always been,
Mm,
a very, very big motivator for me. Um, whether it's, tests in school or whatnot.
hmm
And I think a lot of us have that. I'm trying to think of, somebody I really admire that doesn't have imposter syndrome, and it's pretty hard.
mm,
So I think it's kind of what makes us real. And there's all the psychology behind gambling and stuff where the losses are way more painful than the wins are pleasurable. And maybe we're just kind of wired to feel that way.
yeah, you could
Um,
be right.
yeah, as a single mom and going all in with El Rey Surge this year too, there's no good backup plan. Like, this is it. There's no plan B, so failure is just not an option, and it's
Right.
incredibly motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to come on to El Rey Search because that's a huge and important piece of your story, and it's the current one. It's super exciting. Um, Before we get onto that, like you, not only did you do well within your firm, but within the whole FPC network, 5 years being the top recruiter. What do you attribute that to? Could you like give, you must have been asked by other colleagues or you must have analyzed it yourself. What do you think are the keys to your success, Catherine?
I'm pausing. um, I mean, the baseline is you got to hustle and you got to grind, and that most people do not want to work that hard. And we all know the rates of, new hires. Even with an awesome new hire, we got what, maybe a 50-50 shot they'll get through the first year and be, a good producer. So the
Mhm.
burnout rate's so huge. And I think it's primarily because what we do is hard, and particularly like getting started. And God bless FPC because they had killer training, which is like, and this is in the olden days where you actually could do this. You don't make 100 calls by noon, and for me that's like 9 a.m. Pacific. You didn't work today. And it was just kind of this like fierce attitude where get on the phone. That was the mantra, and in a lot of ways it serves me well because like in the beginning, your heart's pounding as you're trying to talk to a CFO and you think you're gonna die, and then you do it a few times and you're like, no, that was fine. Or like somebody hangs up and you're like, no, no big deal. So at a very young age, you get over rejection very quickly. And, a lot of people just struggle with that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's funny. I used to work with a guy who he took, it was a point of pride that if someone hung up on him, he would phone them straight back and say, "Oh, we seem to have been disconnected,"
That is
and then just carry
hilarious.
right
I
on
love
the
that. Hell, I want to try that now.
so so I appreciate the work ethic and just like being willing to work really hard. Um, but that can't be all there is to it because I also have seen recruiters work really hard but still not get the result. Or let me put it this way. I don't think anybody could work that hard and not do okay.
You're going to
But
be an
then
okay recruiter if you put in the effort.
just through sheer effort, exactly.
Mhm.
But then like it doesn't explain the difference between, let's say, two recruiters both working to both doing a lot of dials a day, working all the hours, but then one bills three times more than the other. Then there's got to be more to the picture than just working hard. So what else do you think is, attribute, would you attribute your own success to, Catherine?
I would say it's been really connecting and developing the client side. And I
Hmm.
figured out early on the money's on the client side. And
Yes.
as harsh as it may seem, there is a ton of time spent on the candidate side when they don't pay us any money. And most people we can't really help. And so early on, and this is still how I've done, you get on a hot account, build the heck out of it, and become their exclusive recruiter for years. and then do it again when that dries up, kind of thing. So I was able to, leverage that. And also, you got to identify the right accounts too. I only work the middle market because that's where you can have the biggest impact in terms of the people you place, but also that's where you've got direct access to your C team and can provide the most value to them as well, particularly if nobody knows their name. So I think really connecting there. And one thing that may surprise people is, and actually, I was talking about this with another person, Pinnacle, this week. Um, they only hire people that seem extroverted, in terms of their own recruiters. I would not consider myself anywhere on the extroverted scale. And so in my client calls, and with FPC, they, will record them and you can see how much you talk versus them. I'm talking 30% of the time, maybe. The other person's talking a lot more
Great.
than I am. So it's like a true interview.
Yes.
And if you think of the old, Dale Carnegie, the more you shut up and get the other person talking, the more they like you. So, contrary to popular belief, I think I'm able to leverage, that piece, which is I never have a problem shutting up on a call because it's like, oh God, what am I going to say? So it's more of, that relationship where you're drawing somebody out, almost via an interview.
Really interesting to hear you say that. So let's explore this a little more because what you described is totally logical. Like, uh, get embedded in a hot account that are growing and like really build that account and then just do that over and over. But obviously, that's easier said than done. So, you mentioned identifying the right account, number one, and you explained the reason you go for the middle market, which all makes total sense. Um, but what is your strategy for um, breaking into and then really developing those accounts?
hmm So obviously, the best way we can get in is via referral. That's always 10 times better. And then there's a million other ways you can get in. The hardest is anything cold, whether it's a email campaign or calling up in the cold call and, coming back, those type of things. Obviously, I'm in your coaching program where you've got the LinkedIn lead generation, those pieces too. So, really pointing to anybody in that network and advocating for that relationship or having somebody give that testimonial, that's how you build that relationship. And I don't do the ad chase campaign stuff ever because I don't want to position myself as transactional either. And a lot of times, I'm thinking of Pinnacle, a top big billers, the network and flip strategy where you're actually working a search and then, it's a high enough level, they're VPs you're talking to kind of thing. And it's always about, hey, how can I help you? Tell me about your growth plans. And that can segue really nicely into that first search.
Let's double click on that, Catherine, because I think that is so smart. And yet, a lot of recruiters um, ignore that opportunity. And what I mean by that is recruiters often have blinkers on and they're either doing BD or they're recruiting, but they don't blend both on the same with the same person or on the same call. And there is kind of an art to doing that. But it's just first of all realizing the candidates and clients are the same person on different days, right?
hmm
And so, why not squeeze the juice out of every conversation? It's hard to get a decision maker on the phone, whether you're recruiting them or, or selling to them.
But it's a lot easier if you're recruiting. If
If
there's
you're
something in
recruiting,
it for
okay, that's a
me.
good
Yeah,
insight.
yeah.
Exactly.
They're
So
way more
going
likely to
into,
respond if it's like, "Oh,
right,
you've got a
right.
job for me."
Yeah, good point. So, by the way, folks, I've got a free ebook on my website. If you go to uh, recruitmentcoach.com, it's 7 ways to get new clients fast. And one of those strategies is flip your recruiting calls. So it is a tried and tested strategy. Some people are better at it than others. I think, Catherine, you are the queen of this strategy. So
Thank you.
yeah, it's easier to get people to respond if you're approaching them about their own career development and you've got something for them rather than you're selling to them. You're trying to get them to buy your services, right?
Mhm.
So,
And like going
um,
along with
go ahead.
that, my pitch, even on a job, is never really
Mhm.
about the job. It's, hey, what would be better than what you're doing today? What type of opportunities do you want to hear about? Obviously, I'm working on a search that, you lined up for. Tell me what you want to do. So I draw that out before I ever dive into the pitch I'm working on, because 8 times out of 10, I can tell they're not right for that by their responses. And then you can say, hey, I was going to pitch this to you, but it's not going to line up. Tell me about your top 5 target companies. And then, as it segues into it, well, hey, how's your team looking? Let me know if I can help you. What's on your radar? So it's really, more of a relationship call than
Mm,
transactional, yes, no, pitch me one thing.
love it. So when you're approaching people, you're not so much pitching a job as you're selling the conversation, like, or is it a hybrid? Like, I have something for you, and I also want to find out, your career goals and tell you what I'm seeing in the market, or like how are you framing that call to get someone to the phone?
I don't think you can pitch a hybrid. To me, it comes across a little squirrely. Like, what do
Okay.
they really want to talk about? So I'm
Mhm,
pretty straight up,
mhm.
um, you know, on the initial approach. And then obviously, once you're talking, then you can go there. I will say, though, that obviously we've been working on some of the client email campaigns too. And the most effective line that I include now on my client email campaigns for, a BD call is, and it's not always on the first one, it could be on the like third sequence. Uh, PS, alternatively, if you find yourself, wanting to know about market conditions and considering a move, would definitely welcome the chance to chat. It's a little more crisp than that, but that's the gist. And that line there, whether it's on like a LinkedIn sequence or email, um, that garners a lot of response. And I've been clear up till then, hey, I'm, looking at working with companies like yours, those type of points.
Love it. That's a golden nugget right there, Catherine. And so you're getting people to the call because they are interested in what you can offer them in terms of, their next opportunity. Um, and the other amazing thing that I see is here's what you do, and I find the top billers are really good at connecting all the dots. And what I mean by that is, like, just the other day, we were doing a coaching call in our program, and there was a couple of recruiters in there who were, and these, by the way, these are smart people, successful people, and they had completed some high level searches, and now they're looking for new business. We're looking for their next search. And I said, have you gone back to the candidates that either weren't interested in the job or who you weren't able to place, that you've just been, the people you've just been recruiting? Have you gone back to
Hmm.
them, to see if you can help them build their teams? And they hadn't.
Hmm.
And to me, like, that's a no brainer, right? These, you already have the relationship. They already know who you are. They've already had an experience of you. Like, there's your next business development list right there, pre-built.
Absolutely. No, I'm super excited about a search I'm kicking off next week through that exact same channel.
Amazing.
Hmm.
Um, so, Catherine, we've got working your socks off. We've got um, starting relationships with really great accounts. But then, how do you build on those accounts? Because I think this is something I'm not great at. I'm a hunter. I'm good at opening new
That's the
accounts,
hardest.
but
The people that have worked with you, that's the low hanging fruit.
I know of course it is, but I just was never that great at it. So how do you do it?
So, like, the most easy tactical way to do it is set up a sequence in whatever ATS you're using. I use Crelate,
Mhm.
and do the schedule the candidate and client check-in post-placement. And so my sequence, the cadence is more frequent until they start, like once a week till they
Mhm.
start, then 2 weeks, and usually a month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And after 12 months, I know whether the candidate's going to give me a job or not, or if I'm ever going to, get a referral off them. So by then, you either put them into a, annual check-in or you don't. And the same thing can go with the client, although I, don't do that quite as frequently. But the touch points are usually just a flip text. Hey, how's, first week going? Congrats on 1 month. How are things? So you're staying really close that way as well. And then, there's all sorts of just casual ways you can touch in, whether it's on LinkedIn or ask for advice on another search. I mean, people that you've already worked with love you. And at any point, if you call them, they pick up the phone, you can say, hey, how's the team going? Yeah, I know we did a BD search together, but I've been doing more finance stuff than anything else. Notice a job posting. Is that something you guys are still looking for? And that doesn't come across salesy. And then
Yeah.
you're trying to get them to flip you into the hiring manager. And so many times, then out of that is like, oh, yeah, no, I'd love to, see if I can help. If I forward you just my contact info, would you be willing to flip that?
I love it. So you're really staying close to both the place candidates and the clients. Um, and that cadence that you described is actually that's really interesting because that's very structured and planned out in advance. So
Well, with our ATSs, it's a lot easier to schedule it and then forget about it, one time than try to
yeah,
remember, because I don't do that.
that's awesome. So could you repeat the cadence? So it's like weekly when they first start, and
Well,
then
first
how
you got
does
to
it
get
go
them to
from there?
start, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
so like after they sign, 3 to 5
Yeah.
days later, it's the hey, how's onboarding going? And then, assuming you don't have a big lag time, it's 2 days because we know they're gonna most likely take the counter offer the second day before they leave. So I always put that on the
Mm.
calendar, just text or something, and then usually first or second day, it's hey, congrats on the first day, how things going. Sometimes I'll switch it to first month if I'm a little worried about the counter or some competing stuff. I'll go 1 week after as well. And it's truly authentic. I want to know if they're going to be kicking tail on their new role or hate it. And it's at those points too where if there's a problem, you can kind of alert the hiring manager as well. Um, yeah, one time though, I had a guy that got COVID like his first week at work. That was something new I hadn't
Oh
dealt with,
no.
and everybody was cool, but it was it spread everywhere through the office, and his boss was like, "Oh God, get out of the office, go home," kind of thing. So that was a
Oh
nuance to
no.
that pattern. But obviously, you're like, "Hey, how you feeling?" The hiring manager too.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think sometimes recruiters don't want to know or they're scared that maybe they place someone and then they're like, you know, they almost don't want to know if there's a problem. But I think
Right.
if there is an issue,
Let's
I'd
flush
rather
it
know about
out.
it first.
Hmm.
Exactly. I don't want to hear about it when the client says, "Hey, by the way, Mark, your candidates bumped out is they didn't stick," and I'm like, "Oh shoot, that's
Well,
because
do
if
I still
you
get
are
paid?
aware of it."
That's what everybody's
Exactly.
wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Exactly.
you do
Um,
this a long enough time though, and that conversation happens. But if you're checking in, you're the first one they call when even after 10 months, they're like, yeah, she's not working out. They don't want their money back. They just want you to fill it again.
yeah. Perfect. So exactly, you've just created an opportunity for yourself. Um, but are you doing stuff like taking people golfing or like meeting in person, or like, is there any extra apart from just keeping really close to them and being in touch? Is there anything else that you're doing to try and develop those relationships?
So if you're asking about in-person meetings, that is something I don't do. I would
Oh,
love to do
interesting.
it.
Hmm.
I happen to live in the dead center of Washington State, and truly our nearest airport is like a 3-hour drive to Seattle. We got
Wow.
one
Okay.
flight coming in and out of this little tiny town daily. So geographically, I'm screwed. And then as a female single mom, trying to pull it together and everything, it's just, it's a struggle to get anywhere. So I don't do that. I'd love to if my lifestyle were a little bit different. But in terms of, really going above and beyond, I would say, it's more authentic, like with our friends. I text everybody and text my hiring managers, those type of things. But I think that's probably, I don't think I'm doing anything that different. I see a birthday thing, wish them happy birthday. I mean, just going into the relationship with like, hey, this is going to be long term and, authentic. And like if I see they made a move or something, I'll text them, not ping them on LinkedIn as well. So, I mean, that's probably the only differentiator.
Do you know what I'm thinking, Catherine? A lot of the the key differentiator is the nuance, and it's quite subtle. Like already you describing the way that you flip your recruiting calls, and there's just some nuances involved that allows you to get better results to somebody who is basically doing the same thing, but they're really not. You're getting another level deep, I think. So it's interesting. So, apart from building those accounts, what else do you think has been a key factor in your success?
I am a big fan of the commitment fee. And I
Tell
got
me
burned
more.
out so bad
Mm,
on contingent searches where there's no relationship. And, if your whole, for me, differentiator is, hey, let's build this long term thing and, network together. And it just doesn't work in these, race to completion kind of setups. So since I launched Elray, I've not taken on a contingent search. It's not to
good for
say like
you.
I would never consider it, but it's
Mhm.
usually just like, hey, here's how I work. And yeah, if somebody pops up, I'm happy to give you a call. But we all know that like happens never in terms of, senior level searches. So that was one big change that had huge impacts.
Well, let's talk more about that. But then first, maybe we better tell the story of launching your own firm, because that's the
Yes.
most exciting and recent chapter in your story.
Yeah. So I grew up in the whole FPC franchise. They're like family, known the guys there since I was 12. And I always kind of assumed I'd buy my father out. He looks great. He is 69 years old. He sounds on the phone like he's 40, but, that's what I thought would happen. And then I've got like the worst divorce ever. Took 3 years to get through. It was absolute
Ah,
nightmare. One of those things you just do not wish upon your worst enemy. And so it became super clear that I could never, and I live 5 hours from that office, I could never move there, um, you know, for the next 10 years kind of thing. So then you accept, like, okay, geographically, I am not where I want to be. And again,
mm,
this is all like when COVID hits. So right about then, I started seeing, particularly in Pinnacle, people having these awesome firms that were totally virtual. I think Alan Fisher is like one of the people that really proved, wow, you
yeah.
can kick tail and nobody has to come into the office. So I was
Shout out to
hugely,
Alan, by the way. That's
yeah.
my interview with him is fantastic, so people should check that one out.
Oh, he is a
What a great
class
guy.
act. Yes. And
Yeah.
he's so generous with his time too. Yeah, class act. The best. So I decided, hey, I can't move to Portland. And my niche is aerospace and defense. And that's not my father's or anybody else's in the firm. So I had to do that really hard call with your dad that's like, Dad, I don't think I want to do this. And what I really want to do is why. And that was tough because he's my best friend. So we worked it all out and, everything came out rosy. And I launched officially April 1. this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I just hired
It's
my third employee.
fantastic.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I can see how that was a difficult and so cool that you've got your dad's full support and it's you're still
Yeah, and
you're
we
still
went
good
into
friends.
it because I mean, this thing can these type of things. Anytime a recruiter, top producer leaves, they can just wreck a firm in terms of just the legal, the mindset, everything. And so both of us went into the exit with, okay, the most important thing to us is this relationship. And yeah, I think on both sides we were, very open. And it's like, oh, if I lose a little money here or there, X, Y, Z, um, let's do what's right. So that worked out well.
Awesome. I'm really happy for you. So launched April 1st and off to a flying start
We've
and
had an
already
awesome like first quarter here. Like, yeah, I'm quite hopeful. I'm very pleased.
so did you have a lot of momentum? Like, were you bringing momentum into your launch from just what you were already working on? Because you're in the same niche.
Yeah,
You're very well established in that
right. I
market.
was, yeah, you hear about certain people that never knew how to recruit, launching a firm at 6 months of the first placement. Fortunately, I was not in that position. So yes, you can, and just knowing the industry and all the players and having done it since 2015, um, you can hit a running start. And there's also confidence there too.
Yeah, fantastic. And so one of the shifts that you've made is you've not done any contingent searches since you launched. So tell me about your thought process around. And by the way, I'm 100% a believer in that. I hate contingency recruiting, and it did not work for me. I moved to retain. I wasn't 100% retained, but I was probably 50-50. But I was moving in that direction because, well, I'm sure all the reasons everybody listening can think of that where you put your heart and soul into a process and then for reasons totally outside your control, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. And that happened enough times that I was like, I've had it. I'm not doing this. I need to get paid up front.
It's
Um,
frustrating.
so frustrating. And people tell me, like, sometimes people make the counter argument and they say, oh, yeah, but I'm really good and I'm better than my competition. So I'm confident. Like, competitors, no problem. I'm going to beat the competition. But what about the time when the client says, "Oh, hey, Mark, that search you've been working on for the last 3 or 4 weeks? Um, we changed our mind. We're going to go in a different direction." Or,
I
"Oh,
know.
hey,
It's happened to
hey,
everybody. Yeah.
yeah," or,
It's
"Hey,
expensive.
we just acquired a business and we're actually we're going to be merging, so we don't need this role anymore."
Hmm.
Or like 101 different things that can happen that have nothing to do with your performance. You performed well. Maybe you did beat the competition, but you still don't get paid. That just drives me bananas. So,
I know. We've all been there. I know exactly what it feels like.
yeah.
Mm.
So, tell me about your approach to engage search then, because I think is it like an engagement fee and then the balance, or is it a third, a
Yeah.
third, a third, or?
Okay, so, there's like a few celebrity. I grew up since I was 12 hearing the names of big trainers, Cahill and
Yeah.
Bartos. And the first time I met Cahill was
Yeah.
like super celebrity. So I have never met John Bartos, but I have heard, and I like watched it on repeat when I was first starting. And you get to a point where you're just like wringing your hands because it's like one too many, just gone belly up, and you had no, there's no reason that you could control for why. Oh, we're not going to do that anymore. So you get to a point where you're like, okay, enough's enough. We got to do something else. So I listened to this tape he did, and he's, quite fiery and cool about committed searches. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm going to do that same thing. And I didn't really have the confidence then to ask for it. And I mean, if you're scrambling for jobs and are like so grateful somebody will give you a contingent job, you don't have the right mindset to ask for a committed search. And
100%. Yeah.
like, and the only way to get over it is to just start doing it, and then your bar changes and, your measure of a good surge goes way up. So, changing that bar as quickly as possible is, a huge help in terms of asking for them. So, namely, I don't even know if he still does this. This is probably like 10 years ago that I'd heard this script, but I still use it every day. And it's namely, hey, here's how we work. To get things kicked off. And I have, cool screenshots and client portals, and I do video for first interviews. So there's a lot I can sell around that engagement. But, it's here's how we work. We ask for 10 grand to kick things off. What you expect from me is weekly calls. We do a video chat. We'll record them so I can share them with my team as well. And then I explain our fee structure as well. And here's the piece that some people won't agree with me on. I make it so damn easy for them to say yes. You got all the bells and whistles. Hey, I'm going to do your first interview for you. Just tell me what questions you want me to ask. You can watch on video when you're on the airplane. Sell the heck out of it. And then I say, hey, if you're not happy with what we're doing after 3 weeks, I'll give you your 10 grand back. Guess how many people have asked for it back?
How many, Katherine?
0. It just does not happen. But what it tells me, because I have had people hem and haw about it, and it's too good to pass up. Pretty much I will work for free for 3 weeks and just need your time and a symbol of your commitment in the form of a check. And if they say no to that, then you have no exclusivity or loyalty. And, they're probably not that serious about the search.
Good point. Absolutely. So first of all, Katherine, thanks for sharing your script. That is brilliant. And hey, shout out to John Bartos, who I know. I've not spoken to for a while.
I've never met him.
John, he's a good guy. I had him twice. I used to do this virtual summit. This is even before webinars. It was like a teleseminar, if anyone even knows what that is. This is 10 years ago. It's like a telephone conference. There's no
that sounds
video.
Fun.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure it was a real hit there, Mark.
It was, Katherine.
Was it
really?
Or not. Okay, I'm kidding.
It's so I did this for 5 years, this virtual summit called Big Biller Summit. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I got all the other trainers and all the other speakers to come and deliver presentations. And you could only listen to them. It was purely, there was no slides, there was no video. You just had to dial in to a conference call and listen to the trainer, and they had to captivate you just with their words.
In our industry, we've got good voices. I mean, beautiful voices.
Well, you do anyway. So I did this for 5 years in a row, and every year I got anywhere from 3,000 to 4,500 recruiters to dial into this thing.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And anyway, so John spoke. In fact, I think it was 3 or 4 years in a row that John spoke for me, and that was one of his presentations. Was about getting the mutually committed search, and he's great on that. So, but the interesting thing that you're doing is making the offer so good that they would feel stupid to say no. And I read a book recently by a guy called Alex Hormozi. Have you heard of this guy?
No. Do tell.
Oh, he's huge on YouTube. It's HORMOZI or ZI, you would say. His book is called $100 Million Offers. And the idea is if you want to build $100 million business, the most important thing you need to get right is your offer. And your offer is essentially what you are delivering to the customer that they are buying into. Okay. So if you need to craft an offer that is irresistible, that the client can't say no to, and that has a high value, it's better. You can charge a premium way more than your competitors are charging if you have an offer that is just so valuable that, there's no comparison. And that's the idea, is that you add elements to your offer that make it really hard. Use the word, you make it hard for them to say no to. And the thing that you're doing is called risk reversal. So risk reversal means
That's
that
totally what I was going to say.
Was it?
Aren't you a psychology major? It's coming out.
So risk reversal is the buyer, typically in a transaction, the buyer perceives that they're the one taking the bigger risk rather than the seller.
Sure.
Right. And so in order to win them over, you need to reverse that so that they feel that actually you're the one who's taking at least an equal risk, if not a greater risk, and that they really don't have much to lose by moving forward. And of course, then you have to deliver. But assuming you do deliver, then your actual risk of having to repay the deposit in this case is pretty low. And even if occasionally you have to give someone their 10 grand back, the number of engaged searches that you've won on the back of that irresistible offer by far outweighs the once in a blue moon that you would have had to pay it back.
Which for me is never.
That's the rationale. Which never, exactly. So it just goes to show. So I think that is brilliant, Katherine. You had something you wanted to add to that?
Oh, I think you can also do it with like new clients in your fee. Like if your average fee is 60 grand and they're asking for like an advisor role or something more junior than you do, those kind of things, you can be like, okay, so candidly, our average fee is 60 grand. I know you're still starting up and growing, burn rate's a huge deal. This is what I can do. By doing that though, namely, I'm hoping that, we have an awesome relationship and that I can help you build that team. So I think even just setting that metric of, hey, this is our normal sales process. And yeah, I'll work a search that's a fraction of my normal fee because I want you to be successful and I want to build your team with you.
I love how you set that up, like you pre-frame it right at the start, that's the expectation. When you say, if I do this for you, what is this? Is it
the search?
A discount?
Yeah, I don't discount really, but certain searches, if you get a high average fee and they want you to work, whether it's a contract gig, which I don't really do contract, but for your best clients, I have those kind of things. Sometimes an advisor search or just where the fee is going to be, a fraction of what your normal fee is. And I wouldn't put a ton of work into that kind of stuff. But even in like the whole PE world, if you do a solid for somebody, it's going to come back to you. And so it's not a discount by any means, but it's just a search outside of your normal parameters. And you're doing that with the hope of building a team and helping them be successful.
Yeah. Awesome. That sounds great. And so far, all your searches have been engaged, and but I'm fascinated that you've just hired your third person, and you're in.
Well, you kind of kicked me in the rear on that one. I think that was Leanne.
In month 2.
Yes.
Yeah, it was probably Leanne.
Yes, it was Leanne.
Tell me about that thought process.
So I had grown up in the 360 model where you're doing everything. And in a lot of ways, 360 training, you go to 2 weeks of it and then it's like, okay, figure it out. Are you going to be good or not? And again, this is kind of the olden days. So now everything's changed. And I think in a really good way, because I just started to hate the 360 model. And it's like once you start achieving a certain level of success, and I know a couple people that are $1 million recruiters that work their fannies off that can do that. But it's like you really look at those top billers, like 2 million production plus, they're on the BD side, and yes, they've done candidate delivery before, but they're really bringing in the business and you've got the delivery side working it out. So I love, you had Pri on here, and I know him and think the world of him, where he does like a really defined 3-person approach, in terms of these pods where you've got your sourcer, your candidate delivery, your BD. So I'm setting up a firm that's not going to be a 360. And as we evolve, I can plan out exactly how I think things are going to go, but then the reality of what we're good at, sets in and the process as well. So it's evolving. But my plan is I've got the best thing I ever did was hired my sister, who's amazing. And she's my older sister. So she'll call me at 5 a.m. and tell me, you got to look at this because he's not on the call, that kind of stuff. She's wonderful. She does all the scheduling, which is what I hate the most. That and all my bookkeeping. And then
what's your sister called?
Her name's Christina.
Christina.
Yes.
All right. Shout out to Christina.
Lead admin. Yeah. And she kicks tail. I mean, imagine never having to touch and pay an invoice during the day. That's wonderful. And handling all of that piece. And then even I set up all my calls because I want the control with the client and the hiring. There's so many dynamics, when you're working with VP level searches, and it can take 2 hours out of your day, and it's just a wasted time, and it'll change on you. So that was the first thing I started to not do. And then I've got an awesome sourcing specialist in the Philippines, Ada, who pretty much does the everything else bucket in terms of marketing and, database and all of the admin pieces. And then obviously right now I'm doing both BD and candidate delivery. However, my new recruit who starts Tuesday is Yogi, and I'm super excited. A lot of people in Pinnacle have met him before because we bumped into him in San Diego. Actually, when I saw you last month, he was one of those people that just had some pop, and you're like, you'd be good. So he starts Tuesday, and he'll be on our candidate delivery side to start.
Amazing. Katherine, this is going to have to be part one of a series, I think, because there's so much more we could talk about. But could you tell the story of finding Yogi? Because it was really cool how that came about.
Yeah. So last month, the Pinnacle had our semi-annual meeting. It was in San Diego. We'd put on outreach on the Midway, which is their big, aircraft carrier museum, and worked with the transitioning veterans group because we were, supporting that. And
wait, just slow down a second, because I think you may lose some folks.
Okay.
Who are like, what is she talking about?
I wasn't there. What is she talking about?
So outreach, explain that, because that's actually, are you in charge of outreach at Pinnacle?
No, Jeremy is. No. Yeah, Jeremy Sizemore. Okay. Yeah, he's our
but he
board.
roped you in.
Yeah, well, I had a personal interest. So the location was San Diego, and then outreach is a committee in Pinnacle where every time we go to a new city, we do a project to support, local, whether it's, packing food in boxes or, helping out at one of the shelters, et cetera. So when I heard we're going to San Diego, I said, well, I'm happy to help on the research because obviously big naval town. So I really wanted to reach out to a transitioning veterans group, if you can work with them. And so we partnered with Reboot, which is the transitioning veterans group in San Diego there. And we're able to go on the Midway, which is, amazing museum if you haven't seen there before, on board an aircraft carrier right downtown in the harbor. So they wanted career advice, and they told us exactly what it was on. And I was moderating the panel, and a bunch of Pinnacle members were there. It was super fun. And so fast forward to 3 weeks later, I just have 2 bad interviews and 200 Indeed resumes for a remote recruiter, which I'm hiring. And I call up my dad. I'm like, and I even recorded one. I'm like, this guy just never shuts up. It's like he talked 80% of the time on a candidate screen, and he's been doing this for 5 years. I'm like, I don't know. And dad's like, what you really need, because you're an A&D, is this is your dad telling you, what you really need. And right there, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. All right. Tell me what I need, Dad. And he goes, you need somebody that's been in the service, that's coming out, because they're going to gain, a lot more traction. They're going to know the industry better. I wouldn't, worry about bachelor's or master's or any of those things. You need somebody with some pop that's coming out of the military. He's like, how about that guy in the video? Because Pinnacle did an awesome video. And once you say that, like anybody who was there goes, oh, yeah, I remember him. So he definitely came across, and he actually hosts podcasts, in his spare time kind of thing as well.
Cool.
So really good, charismatic, feature. And so I called him up and I said, great idea, Dad.
And
And he's starting Tuesday.
all right, that's cool.
Mhm.
I love how that all just serendipitously came together, but also you recognize that attitude and personality and mindset is so much more important than having recruiting experience. You know, someone can have 5 years experience on their resume. That doesn't mean they're actually good, right?
Right, right. And I live near, Amazon Meta where they just did a ton of layoffs on their TA. So you got, a lot of resumes, but then you actually just say, okay, let's do a candidate screen. And I did that with Yogi. He had no idea what a candidate screen was ever. And he did like by far the best.
Wow. So he outperformed the experienced recruiters on the
By a
role play.
mile in the role play. When you video it, it's
Wow.
like, oh. And he had no idea. He's like, okay, so who are you and what am I? Oh, okay. But it was just this mindset of
Yeah.
how do you approach somebody else? How do you draw them out? Get them talking, those type of things. So,
Yeah.
and my style is really, last thing we're going to do is make a hard pitch. If you need me, I need you. Maybe the time is not right, X, Y, Z. But it's really, he got that without even, me needing to direct him. So that was what was a big differentiator.
Awesome. All right. Well, congrats on your
Thank
third
you.
fantastic hire. But I'm curious, could you say a little more about that last point? You kind of just threw it in there, but I think that's a potential golden nugget. When you say you don't give a hard pitch, and you kind of skimmed over, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. And it's always been my style. And then actually, when I was pledging Pinnacle, they had a speaker, Josh Braun, that was brought in. And so he's king of the I'm not going to sell you emails. So I got more curious.
Oh, I'm
Do you
on
know him?
his email list.
I know, I
Yeah,
get
I
him
don't
too
know
all the
him.
time. Yeah. He came to my pledge class when I was Wes Ashworth and I were pledging that day. Um,
Shout
but
out to
it's
Wes.
we both got in. So the whole premise is nobody likes a hard sell anymore. And this is
Mhm.
totally contradictory to what we, how it was taught 20 years ago, where you're
Mhm.
trying to say, hey, can I accept on your behalf? That doesn't work anymore. Like we've had too much, sales in our face. We have too much media for that to work at all. Like the strong arm approach does not work. It's all about attraction rather than promotion.
Mhm.
And so, like when you're doing a candidate screen, I'm like covering up the job almost. It's not like I'm hiding it and we'll get there, but it's like first let's dive in and tell me, why you took my call. I really like X about you. What prompted you to respond? Those type of questions.
Mhm.
Because, how do you even know if you want this person to be a candidate unless they start talking and building that relationship too?
Yeah.
And I tell them, hey, I'm never going to try to talk you into something. At the end of the day, you're always going to do what's best for you and your family, and everybody should understand that. And if they don't have the right intentions.
Love it. That's a really great. It's a great mindset, but it's also a nice verbiage to present to somebody. I think that is
Well, it's
brilliant.
true. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
we try to control everything, but there's a whole lot of things that are not within our control. And that's what the commitment fee is about. We try to control and mitigate some of these uncontrollable things. And at the end of the day, there is nothing I am going to say that is going to truly, be that game changer. Like if they're going to take the counter, at the end of the day, they're going to do it. Let's find out earlier than later.
Fantastic. Katherine, this has been awesome. Really enjoyed getting a chance to do this, and I loved having dinner with you when we were in San Diego together,
Yes.
and
So fun.
that was fun. But this was awesome. I really appreciate it.
I'm honored. Thank you, Mark, and for what you do for our community.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, Catherine. Have a great day.
Bye.